Welcome to our next episode. This is on how your workouts might actually be harming your pelvic floor and your hormones. So, it's really easy for us as women to unknowingly do harm to our body, to our hormones, because we're following fitness approaches that just were not designed for a woman's body. So, today we're going to be looking at things that you want to actually avoid when it comes to supporting your pelvic floor and your hormones. This episode is going to be correct for you if you have pelvic floor issues currently or hormonal dysregulation, and it's going to be equally as important for those of you who don't have any pelvic floor issues or severe hormonal dysregulation, but you don't want to cause yourself harm. This is especially important if you're just starting out weightlifting. Really, really important. So we would call this preventative care. These are things that I wish I had known 15 years ago before I started weightlifting. As a heads up, this episode is a little bit of a teaser for a 2-day workshop I'm doing with a pelvic floor physical therapist where we are going to go into more of the how of pelvic floor health to make sure that you know how to stabilize properly, you know how to weight lift without harming your pelvic floor, you know how to support your hormones when you're training by using more smart training protocols. So I'll share more about that at the end of this episode, but just giving you a little bit of context. So, this is the Feminine Strength Podcast. This is where we share innovative strategies for women to sustainably build a strong, fit body that supports our hormonal health and our nervous system resilience. I'm your host, Jess Mather. I'm a strength and rehab professional with over 14 years of experience working with people all over the world to help them become stronger, healthier, and happier in their body. So, in this episode, this quick episode, we're going to be talking about the pelvic floor and periods. So here are things that you do not want to do in your training and in life if you want to take care of your pelvic floor. So number one, over bracing during your lifts or bearing down when you're weightlifting. So this is actually a cue we hear, just bear down, just brace. There's a cue I learned from a popular lifter and coach, Mark Ripito. Mark Ripito has some really great stuff out there. But 15 years ago, when I heard one of his cues, he said arch hard. When I was doing back squats, I would arch hard, which meant that what I was doing was going into what's called an anterior pelvic tilt. You're tilting your tailbone out, like you're sticking your booty out. And then I was loading that. And that is not safe for the spine. I did damage to my back from doing that because I didn't really understand the cue he was giving, and it did harm. So we hear different cues like suck your belly button in, pull your belly button to your spine, the bear down or brace, arch hard. Sometimes those cues are necessary in that context, but especially when we take it out of context or we don't actually know how to apply that cue, that's when we can really get into trouble. So just know that this over bracing, like you're just bearing down, is not actually going to support your pelvic floor and create the true core stability you need to lift safely. So no bearing down. The next one has to do with core stability is skipping breath coordination. So your diaphragm is very important when it comes to your pelvic health. The diaphragm and good breathing mechanics also improves your performance so much. If you just start breathing really well, your performance can bump up very, very quickly. We often say technique is the secret to strength. So if you have good technique in the way that you're moving and breathing, your strength is going to skyrocket. And therefore, your physique goals are also going to skyrocket. The more strength you have generally, the better your physique is going to look as well. So when it comes to breathing, we want to make sure that you're breathing in a way that one, you're breathing at all. A lot of us will hold our breath when we're breathing. We're just we're bearing down and we're not breathing. That is completely the opposite of what you want to do when it comes to the pelvic floor. So again, we'll go over more of the breathing mechanics in detail on this workshop. But just know if you're not breathing right now during your lifts, just at least try to pay attention to your breath. Usually that gives us a good starting point because it's not usually something we think about. We're thinking about so many other things when we're lifting, especially when we're starting. Just please pay attention to your breathing. Focusing on too much tension is another thing that we'll do that can compromise our pelvic floor. So we hear doing a lot of Kegels, right? Creating a lot of tension through the pelvic floor, trying to strengthen our pelvic floor. We can't only be creating tension. So we also need the relaxation. We also need some coordination as well. So that that constant tension can create what's called hypertonicity in the pelvic floor, excessive tone, excessive tension in the pelvic floor, which can lead to all sorts of other issues. So if you're just doing a bunch of Kegels, but you're not continually contracting and creating a ton of tension through the pelvis, but you're not also getting that relaxation, that can be harmful as well. The next thing is ignoring your pelvic floor when nothing's wrong. So usually when it comes to pelvic floor health, we don't think much about it until we start to have symptoms. So if you're watching this for preventative care, that's great. That's unusual. Most of us, we won't really think much about the pelvic floor until something happens. And if your pelvic floor is having some issues right now, that's okay too. There's always solutions, but just know that the more we pay attention to it now, even again, if you already have some things going on, it's going to be even more important as the decades go on. So I'm really glad you're here and listening to this. It's very, very important. Like there can be some issues when you're lifting and you're not paying attention to the pelvic floor. For example, our next point is on poor programming. So I had a client come in and she was training 4 days a week, heavy lower body lifting, and she also lacked some of the deep core stability necessary. And there were some other complicating factors, and she ended up developing really bad chronic pelvic pain where she couldn't train at all. And now she's doing great. We're moving forward. She's going back to doing lunges and core stability drills, and the pain is coming down. But with all of that intense programming where she also didn't know how to stabilize properly, especially under load. The thing is, too, sometimes they'll be able to stabilize under lighter loads. And then as soon as the weight starts to get heavier, we don't realize how much our stabilization starts to deteriorate. And that'll happen also when we just have poor programming, meaning we're training too hard, too heavy, which is really, really common. Doing 4 days a week of heavy lower body, I wouldn't professionally recommend. Sometimes people can handle that amount of volume, but in general, that's going to be a lot. That's going to be a lot of strain on your body. So those are the main things when it comes to your pelvic floor. These are some things that you don't want to be doing if you want to support your hormonal health in your training journey. So number one kind of piggybacks off of our last point. You don't want to be prioritizing intensity all the time. You don't want to be going 100% all the time. Waiving the load or waiving the intensity is one of the best things I've learned in the world of strength training, where you're not trying to hit PRs or personal records all the time. That can really stress our body out on so many levels that waiving the load or waiving that intensity is so critical so that we're not pushing day in and day out. And it also removes some of the guilt as well. If we feel like all our workouts have to be perfect, they don't. We actually need to waive the load a little bit more. On that point as well, if we start to ignore that we ourselves are cyclical beings, we are not performing in a linear way day in and day out, yet we expect our body to respond in that way, that's going to create some issues. That's going to stress our body out and stress our hormones out. So if you've been following my work for a while, you know that for women, we have them sync their weightlifting with their menstrual cycle. So we match where their energy is throughout the month to how much they're pushing in their training so that we are not over stressing them, that we're actually working right in a beautiful zone where they're able to progress, but not do too much. We refer to it as the minimal dose effect. So your nervous system cannot keep up with this linear loading where we're just pounding the pavement. Maybe we can get away with it in our 20s. And honestly, when I did it in my 20s, my early mid 20s, I was like really pushing and I still burned out. I still got adrenal fatigue and hypothyroidism. So even when I was younger, it did not work. So please do not ignore our cyclical, shifts that we have in our body. We really do not work on a linear level. So not great for the hormones if we try to do otherwise. The other piece is not having parasympathetic balance. Very important. We have, in a very general sense, the sympathetic branch of the nervous system and the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. So if we're always doing more sympathetic dominant work like weightlifting, there's nothing wrong with doing sympathetic work, right? It's a stressor that helps us adapt and get better and stronger. But if we're not balancing that with parasympathetic activity, the other branch of our nervous system, then we're not actually going to be recovering. We're not actually going to be getting stronger. There's a quote that I loved. I don't remember who said it. You're only as strong as your recovery. You are only as strong as your recovery. If you're not recovering, your performance is going to suffer, and therefore your results are going to suffer. You're going to have higher injury risk. You're going to feel mentally burned out on your training. Your hormones aren't going to be happy. So you're only as strong as your recovery. We need to prioritize recovery, and that looks different for everybody as well. There's another quote that goes, fatigue masks fitness. That one really stuck out to me when I heard it. Fatigue masks fitness. So if we're always training, we're always pushing really hard, then we're always tired. Then when we really want to utilize our fitness, it's not going to be there because we're always overworked. So we need that parasympathetic balance so we're not beat up all the time. The other thing that can stress our hormones out in our training journey is undereating, which I did a whole nother episode on. I have been there, done that with the undereating. So many women have, and we've been doing chronic dieting. This is especially relevant if you also aren't at your goal weight right now, but you feel like you're not eating very much. This is very relevant because what will typically happen is we'll start to go on a diet and then our body will plateau, which is normal and expected. But then usually what happens is we go lower in calories and then we hit another plateau and then we go lower in calories and then we hit another plateau. We're not quite there where we want to be yet. And now we've got down regulation of the metabolism and our hormones. And now we just have to go lower and lower and lower. And we never end up building the calories back up to a healthy maintenance level. If you're also exercising while you're going into a calorie deficit like that, that just adds a little bit more fire to it. It adds a little bit more stress. So definitely under eating is not going to be in your best interest when we're working with a healthy hormonally balanced body. So again, there's a whole nother episode on that, but there's just so much else we could say. But please, please, please make sure you are fueling when you are training, eating enough carbohydrates, eating enough calories, even if you want to lose weight. It's a whole nuanced conversation, but if I could just plant a little seed, that would be it. I'm also going to leak a little secret word in today in this episode. So every episode of the Feminine Strength podcast, I land a secret word. And if you collect 8 of these secret words, we give you 10% off the Feminine Strength program. So several of you have already found all 8 of these secret words. The secret word of this episode is sunshine. This is the secret word today is sunshine. So it doesn't matter which episodes you listen to, it's just as long as you collect 8. So the last thing that we want to be mindful of when it comes to supporting our hormonal health in our training journey is the excessive cardio. We've moved away from that culturally. We've seen a shift into more women weightlifting, right? The excessive cardio still is sometimes very attractive for us. We think that that's going to burn the calories more and make us lose weight, and we'll do running or spin classes and all these crazy things. But generally what ends up happening, especially if we're trying to weightlift as well, and especially if we're trying to do a calorie restriction, is it's just too much. Remember that fat loss and muscle building are hormonal events. So we want to make sure we support the hormones in the things that we're doing to make things easier for us. It's not as simple as the calories in, calories out equation. Yes, that is important. Yes, that is definitely a factor, but it's not necessarily the entire picture, especially when our hormones are not working in our favor. So we talked a lot about the things not to do, the things that I wish I had known when I had first started lifting. So now we can look at what we can do to actually support the pelvic floor and support our hormones. So the how to a little bit more, the solutions. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I am working with a pelvic floor physical therapist where we're putting on a 2-day workshop where day 1, she's going to be talking more about the pelvic floor. She's going to be going over breathing techniques. She's going to be going over how to stabilize your core when you're lifting. She's going to be going over what's called interoception, where you're actually building awareness around your pelvic floor. So many women, when they have trauma, stress, especially birth trauma, they'll feel very disconnected from their pelvis and their pelvic floor. So we're going to be going over some drills in that class. That will be really, really good because the first step is always awareness, right? Even knowing how to connect with your pelvic floor, and then we can learn how to stabilize and optimize our performance. She's also going to be exploring signs and symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. We're going to be looking at things like Kegels, and why that's not always the best approach and what exercises can actually be therapeutic for pelvic floor. And then on day 2, I'm going to be talking about how to lift weights in sync with your monthly cycle to avoid burnout, to decrease our injury risk, to help with our consistency is really, really huge too. If you find that you're good on a training program for a few months and then you get really burned out and you are struggling with consistency, often that has to do with because we're not giving ourselves adequate breaks. So it always just feels like we're kind of pounding the pavement. So on day 2, we're going to be looking at a system, a method to make sure that your consistency stays high, that you don't feel burned out and you feel optimistic about your workouts, that you actually want to lift weights and it's something that you enjoy doing rather than something you're like, oh, I got to drag myself to do my training and it feels heavy and it feels hard. We're also going to be looking at how to overcome common challenges that women have, like weight loss resistance, adrenal fatigue, injuries, things of that nature, by using smarter training protocols that actually, again, support our hormones and our metabolism. Very, very important because, when I bring on clients, when I'm speaking to women in my audience, I'm anticipating that you guys are going to be lifting for the rest of your life, hopefully. Fitness is a lifelong thing, right? It's the same thing as brushing your teeth. We don't think there's ever going to be a day where we're not going to have to brush our teeth and floss. It's just something that we do. Fitness is just something that we have to do because we live in such sedentary lives now, and we know of the benefits of weightlifting now. We know how important it is for our bone density, for our functionality, to decrease our fall risk as we get older, and also, of course, to feel good in our clothes and to feel good out of our clothes, honestly. So we can feel confident in our bodies, we feel strong, we feel healthy, we feel like we can go do fitness activities and we're not embarrassed or we don't feel like we can't keep up. So, we are going to be going over sustainable methods as well so that you can weightlift for the rest of your life in a really safe way, protect your pelvic floor, and feel good while you're doing it, right? We don't want to do this in a way that's harsh and aggressive and like, no, we're done with that. We don't have time for that. So if you want to sign up for this workshop, the website is rebuildingbody.com/RJ workshop. R as in Rose, J as in juice, or Rebecca and Jess. So rebuildingbody.com/RJ workshop. And you can sign up there. If you are watching the recording of this episode, like after we do the live version of it, you're just welcome to have the recording as well, so you don't have to show up live. I am really looking forward to it, and I hope you are able to attend. This is going to be a really special treat for you guys. So hope this episode was also informative for you, and we'll see you at the workshop. Bye, guys.